Thank you all for coming down. I want to introduce Francesca Padilla. She is a Dominican-American fiction writer born and raised in New York City. She is a recipient of a Walter Dean Myers grant from We Need Diverse Books and holds a BA in creative writing from the State University of New York at Purchase College. She's the author of What's Coming to Me. That's a chapter that you get from the chapter that you read the other day, and lives with her family in Rochester, New York. And I just want to thank Gary Reynolds, Chantal Lisher, the Wilson PTSO, Writers and Books, for putting this on, and of course, Ms. Padilla, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so again, my name is Francesca Padilla, or if you don't want to say it with the spice, Francesca Padilla. I like to think that Francesca Padilla is cursive and Francesca Padilla is print. But so I thought I would just kind of tell you a little bit about myself and how I became a published author. It's kind of a long story, but I'll stick to the highlights. And then I kind of wanted to just kind of talk a little bit about the chapter that I sent and why. And then hopefully, if everyone is interested, to do a bit of a Q&A. It is early, so I have decided to bribe you with gifts. And basically, anybody who asks a question can get a free book. Again, I'm just kind of talking to you about my life. So I told a relative of mine that I was going to give a talk to high school students about my writing and my life, and I was like, I kind of want to talk about creative writing and how it kind of saved my life and why. Well, that's what I was thinking. What I really said was, I want to talk about what my experience was in high school, and they were like, don't you think that's kind of negative? And the reason they said that is because I had a pretty negative high school experience, and that kind of made me just want to do it more. So here I am. So I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I was born in Manhattan. I was raised in Brooklyn, and I spent a good amount of the first 10 years of my adult life in Brooklyn, and then before moving here. I have been writing since since I can remember. I've been a writer and a reader, and I very distinctly remember starting to identify as a writer when I was in third grade, when a teacher told me I was good at it and that I should keep doing it. And I was like, all right, let's just, fine, great. And so that was kind of my identity as a child and as a young adult. And so when I was in high school, I started to write novels, and that's what I was doing. But at the same time, I also had a lot going on at home, which is not going to be a surprise given the chapter that you read. But I just want to say, that's not the character that you read. That's not the same as me. That's a fictional character, totally separate. But obviously, there's some inspirations, things that I've experienced in real life that I decided to use the character to explore. So I had a lot going on at home. My mother was sick for a lot of my life. She had a few different chronic health conditions. My father was in prison for 10 years because he helped a friend of his hide drugs and in his apartment. And so he wasn't a drug dealer. I tell people he wasn't a drug dealer. He just helped a friend. And I was like, why am I explaining this? Nobody's gonna be like, oh, well, that's, people are gonna make judgments about prison, no matter what you tell them. So this all got very difficult when I was a young teenager, kind of entering high school. My mother's health got really, really bad really quickly. She was in the hospital a lot, and I was kind of left on my own. My brother, I had a younger brother. He would be watched by other relatives. So I literally spent days, even a week or two at a time, by myself. And then at the same time, my father had just entered prison, and not in New York, and they weren't together. So I had a single mom she was like a professional sick person at a certain point. She was like always at the hospital. And my father, before he was incarcerated, and after, he was an artist. And he had like various odd jobs before that. And obviously money was tight. Like, I grew up in a 1-bedroom apartment that was used as a 2-bedroom apartment. And my mom was a wonderful person who let people stay, like, if they didn't have anywhere else to go. So sometimes it was more than just me, my mother, and my brother. And I was just so desperate to get out. I was tired of the cramped quarters. I was tired of having to see all of my mother's medical equipment, which there was a lot of, just kind of in my face all the time. Like, I was done. Like, I was done. So the reason that my relative said, like, it's kind of negative for you to talk about your high school experiences, because at some point, I was a good student for elementary school and middle school, and then high school hit and these life circumstances happened. I just kind of gave up, and I stopped going to class. I cut class a lot. I would stay home, or I would go out with my friends. And I was also dealing with mental health issues. Like, I was hospitalized once. Yes, I was hospitalized once, and because it was just such a long time. It wasn't a long time, but it felt like a long time. It was like maybe 3 days or something. But it's traumatizing to be hospitalized in a mental health unit as a child, especially before a lot of changes that have happened since then to how mental health care is provided. So I just had kind of given up, and I was still writing. I was still writing novels. I was still like, this is just what I'm doing. Like, I had to do, like, this is just what I wanted to do. And with my time, I would stay up super late just writing, and then not go to school. And I was in a creative writing class, and I did not like it. And I think that's the reason that my relative was like, maybe you shouldn't talk about that, but it's just me. It's just like, I'm just being honest. Like, I did not get along with my creative writing teacher. She was not super engaged with me. Like, I would bring in samples or things that I was working on when I did go to class, and she just kind of like didn't really notice or care. So that was difficult. And then I think that at some point, so when I was hospitalized, I talked to another young woman who, she was a little bit older. She had been in the Navy, and she was telling me about the Navy and how great it is. And I decided that that's what I'm going to do with my life. I'm going to go to the Navy. But it turns out that you can't. Apparently, it's hard to get into the armed forces when you have like documented mental health issues. So at a certain point, I was just like, I have to do something. I have to get out of here. And it really hit me that if I didn't change something, that I was going to be stuck indefinitely in this tiny apartment in Brooklyn. So I applied to college, let me back up. And I was like failing multiple classes. Hi, Sally. I was failing multiple classes at this point, and most of the classes that I failed were in junior year, which is a really important year if you're trying to go to college. So I happened to find out that SUNY Purchase had a creative writing program, and that a big part of the application process was your portfolio. Like, so your grades, like I sort of read between the lines, and I was like, it seems like your grades aren't as important, but if you have a great sample, and I had all these stories that I'd been working on. I sent them like 50 pages because they didn't say how many pages to send. Now they do, it's like 8 to 20, or it's like 20 pages at most probably, but I sent them so much content, like so much of what I've been working on, and I got in. And so that's why I tell people that creative writing saved my life, because it was kind of my only option at that point. It was my way out, and it was how I was able to get out of Brooklyn and get some sort of distance from my family. I'm very close to my family. My mom and my brother. My mother's no longer with us, but I was very close to them. But I just couldn't be in that apartment anymore. So that's how I got out. And I graduated from the creative writing program, and I kind of stopped writing. I also had a day job in Health and Human Services. Right now, I work at United Way. And I've always been, I had no desire to work in publishing or to like spend all day writing. I'm kind of a slow writer, but so I kind of stopped writing, and then in my mid-20s, I got pregnant, and once again, I was like, if I don't do something, like this might take over my life, and I might not ever publish a book, which my whole life I just knew eventually I would. But at that point, I was like, I might not actually if I have a child. So I started writing again. I went to different workshops, and I got an agent that way by going to workshops. So I always tell people that if you want to be a writer, any kind of writer, go to events, go to workshops, anything that you can do to meet people, whether in person or online, and make those connections, meet other writers. Because down the line, those connections actually become really important. A lot of the people I met in my workshops that I was in ended up being other published authors who either, well, we could help each other like in various professional ways or writing or however. So yeah, so it took me a long time to kind of publish this book, and I won't kind of go into why, but there were long moments of me not prioritizing writing, which I don't regret because I have many other things going on. But eventually I did publish the book, and kind of here we are. So it was published in 2022, and so the hardcover came out first, and then the soft cover came out a year later, 2023. And here we are. That's the long and the short of it. So I think I wanted to talk also about the book itself, just kind of, because I realized that I didn't send a description. I mean, information is available to all of us rather quickly, so if you were genuinely interested, you probably could have just looked it up. But I'll give you the rundown of what the book is about. So it's about a girl named Minerva Gutierrez who lives in a fictional town called Nautilus, New York, which is on Long Island. So it's kind of like, has anyone read The Great Gatsby? Have you heard of The Great Gatsby? Okay, so that's a fake town. It's a canonical, like, good morning. It's a it's like a classic book, but it has the town that it takes place in is fake. And so my thinking with that was like, well, if F. Scott Fitzgerald, this like big fancy white guy writer, could do that, then I could do that too. And so she lives in this town. It's kind of like very out there, isolated suburban beach town, and she's going through a lot of the same things that I went through as a kid. And again, I want to say that this is a character that I have used to explore these issues. A lot of the time, people think that when someone has written a book or a story that is autobiographical, that it's like the character is literally them, and I don't see it that way at all. Like, it's kind of like if somebody asks you to draw a picture of a car, are you gonna, like, is it easier to draw a picture of a car? Like, and let's say you're not like, you don't have a photographic memory, right? So it's gonna be easier to draw a picture of a car if you're outside a car looking at it rather than sitting inside of the car. So that's kind of how I feel about it. Like, that character has to be separate from me, that I can sort of view and inform. I also compare it to like an actor doing a role, and just kind of like stepping into that role and exploring and bringing parts of themselves to it. So that's kind of how I think about the fictional characters that I come up with. And for me, character is first, and that doesn't have to be that way for everyone. Like, some people are really into the plot, especially if they write fantasy or something that's very So I think that's very intricate with the plot. Like that might be more important, but for me, it's really about character, and I'm the kind of reader who, if a character is compelling and their voice is compelling to me, that I will follow them anywhere, no matter what they're doing. So that's important to me. And so I didn't even get to the plot yet. So this girl is she's going through a lot of the same things. Her mother, it's just her and her mom's been hospitalized a lot, and she's skipping class. This is actually I'll get to that. I'll get to the chapter. But one day there is a robbery. That's the first chapter of the book. I don't know if anyone looked it up, you'll see that. And you might have, it's a very like, kind of a chapter, and that's why I didn't send it as the sample, because I felt like the chapter that I did send was a little bit more representative of who the character is as a person, and as I said, character is really important to me. So one day there's a robbery at the ice cream stand where she works. This job at the ice cream stand is kind of the only good thing that she has going for her. She is also desperate to leave her town, but she's also kind of aimless and, again, not going to class, not really engaged, not really being watched or kind of taken care of by any of the adults in her life, really. And so she has this job that she's kind of obsessed with money in a way. Like a lot of people who grow up with low income are. It's like, it's about money. Like, that's how I survive. And the only problem is that this job is that her boss is a scumbag and makes her work life really unpleasant. So when this robbery happens, it actually uncovers the possibility that her scumbag shady boss is hiding money in the ice cream stand. And then so part of the book becomes about her working with a friend slash neighbor slash weed dealer to find the money and solve all their problems. And that's going to be, and because her friend doesn't want to sell weed anymore because it sucks. And like her, and Minerva just wants to survive. And so that's the one thread of the book, and then the other thread is Minerva navigating what's going on with her mother and how's she going to get out, and just these. And I'm trying not to spoil the book a little bit, but there's a lot that she's holding inside that is like she's just barely keeping it together, and she feels like if she lets a little bit out, she's going to crack. And so these two threads are woven together and finally come together at the end. And then there's friendship, there's a love element. She has a crush on the only boy who works at the ice cream stand. So one of the reasons that her boss is a scumbag is that I keep saying scumbag, because I don't usually use that word, but like one of the reasons that her boss is very unpleasant is that he only hires like pretty girls, and which is an experience that I have in Brooklyn. But that's a story for another day. I definitely got some solid details from working at Uncle Luigi in Brooklyn. Oh, I never said Uncle Luigi before. I usually keep that.
Really?
I was paid in cash. What is he gonna? He can't sue me because he has no documentation that I ever worked there. So. And just like Minerva, and just like me, Minerva was paid in cash. So, and that's one of the reasons that she's like, that she and her friend realized that, oh, her boss is up to something because she's paid in cash. And he's also like got connections with the local police. So it's not as simple as just like, oh, I'm gonna go to the police and say that my boss is, doing X, Y, and Z, and being, at the end of the day, rather abusive. So I'm going to the chapter, the reason, so that's why I chose the chapter, because it really kind of conveyed, first of all, it's the only chapter that takes place in school. And my thought process was not like, oh, I'm going to a school, so I'll send a chapter about school. I sent it because in that chapter, she's feeling everything that she's going through, and like me, like, it kind of defines her life at this moment. Like, the unfair things that are happening to her, but she can't say it. And she's in a setting where she should be able to say it, but she can't. And so that's why I chose to send that chapter. Now that I've kind of talked about all of that, I really would like to I'd like to just go to Q&A. Does anyone, and I'm not going to tell you to ask your question yet, but does anyone have a question? Okay. Okay, so I'm told that there was some good discussion that came out of that chapter that you all read. And so I would love to hear I'm just really curious what you all said. So hold that thought. So so whether you have a question or a comment or just like an observation, I'd like to know. And so the first, I'm gonna say 5 people who ask a question can get a free book. If you don't want a free book, that's fine. It's fine. I could just sell it for money. It's true. So when you are an author, a traditionally published author, and this is just an aside, and I like to share this because it turns out not everybody knows this, but so there's 2 kinds of publishing really. At least when you are a fiction writer, a novelist, there's traditional publishing, and then there's self-publishing. And they both have their strengths and weaknesses. So with traditional publishing, that means that a book publisher, a publishing house, Scholastic, Random House, what have you. Mine is called Soho Press, and their imprint, so publishers have imprints like this department does these kinds of books, or this department does these kinds of books. So my imprint is called Soho Teens, which is adult books. So traditional publishing is a publisher basically pays you to publish your book. And then they work with you on things like marketing and sales. And well, it depends on where you go. Sometimes they don't do very much of that. But they work with you to get the book out there, to get it in libraries and bookstores, Barnes & Noble, local bookstores. And then you earn royalties from that. And so that's a whole thing. That is a whole other thing. But that's traditional publishing. And then self-publishing is you do everything yourself, but you get all of the profits. And then there's like other versions where it's like hybrid, or that's a different conversation for another day. So I forgot where I was going with that, with the difference between publishing and
That you can make money when you sell your books.
Yes. So when you are a traditionally published author, they typically give you a box of your own copies that you can do whatever you want with. You can sell them yourself. Sometimes if I go to a library, there's like some sort of law or regulation that you can't sell books inside of a public library. So I had the option of like selling them myself, but like outside of the library. I don't know. So there's certain situations where like I could sell the books, or I could just do like a giveaway, or it's up to me what I want to do. So that's what these copies are. And so let's just get to it. I make them good. Okay, make them good. The questions or the comments, but I won't judge, and I won't tell you if I'm just curious. I just want to hear what you all have to say. Yes.
I really don't have a question. More
Okay.
of, like admiration, because it's like I feel like a lot of people could understand like the situation and relate to it. Because like definitely the part where you were like trying to figure out what is something that you want to do with your life, like with the creative writing and just like feeling like the whole world is against you, and you just started off from rock bottom and worked your way up. So I was just saying that I admire that, because that is true. When you are coming from a low income family, it's like there is nothing on your mind except trying to be better. And I just feel like when other people have a different viewpoint, a different perspective, they come and respond with a different approach and a different response that is like you know, you weren't born with this. You are born in privilege and money, and you know, you just don't. It's a lot to say about it, but I'm just paraphrasing right now. But I just admire that you mentioned about that and about the person in the book and like how she was really trying her hardest to be better and just get out of the rat race.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that one word that I haven't even mentioned is shame. That when you're going through a lot, and on top of that, you have no money, like there's a feeling of shame that just follows you around in all of your interactions. And again, that's what I was trying to convey in that chapter. And that's probably the most like autobiographical chapter, because I feel like I had multiple interactions like that in school and in other areas. So when you're poor and like, you know, you end up in various offices sometimes, having to explain your life or having to explain yourself, explain your existence, and if that person, and if you, especially if you are, if that shows up as anger, you know, not everybody is going to give you the benefit of the doubt that what you're really experiencing is deep sadness or confusion, and it's not anger, and or it is anger, but it's more than that. You know, at the root of it, it's shame and it's sadness and loneliness, and so yes. So when I was going through all of that, like at first I would tell people, and I went to public school in Flatbush, Brooklyn. And so I didn't go to school with a bunch of rich kids, but I feel like no matter where I went, I was always the poorest. Like no matter where I went, unless I was in the Medicaid office or the community health center. Like I just felt like it was always like, and I knew exactly how much my mother made, how much money my mother made, exactly how poor I was, because I applied to college by myself. Like I did all that paperwork by myself. I had to deal with the financial aid by myself. At one point, I went to the financial aid office I got like the maximum financial assistance that you could get because I had so little money, and like TAP and Pell and all of that. And I remember going to the financial aid office at Purchase College, and there was an issue like with I think it was my TAP payment. It's a grant, it's not like a loan. And I had the maximum amount that you could get because I was so damn poor. And but there was an issue with that payment for that semester or that year. And I went to the financial aid office and I was like, hey, I think that there's something going on. I didn't see this money coming in, blah, blah, blah. And she was like, well, how much do you get usually? And I told her, I think it was like $2,000. And she was like, oh, that's impossible. You have to be dirt poor for that. And I was like, I'm dirt poor, thank you. So like people are just, so yeah, I care. So at first, like I would tell people what was going on at home, but a lot of the time they just didn't know what to say because they couldn't relate. Even people my own age. And especially when I went to college, where really at that point, I was meeting rich people, like there were rich people, you know, people with money that I could not comprehend. So I just stopped telling people. And then eventually ended up in my writing. And now I do tell people to demonstrate that growing up poor, growing up with like all these things happening to you that you have no control over doesn't have to define your path. So I'm gonna sign this for you. Do you want the book?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can sign it.
And feel free to do whatever you like.
Oh,
Just don't use it as a doorstop.
I'm not. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, I saw this hand first.
I noticed that in the chapter that we read, she talked about being a former gifted student.
Being a what?
A former gifted student.
Yeah.
And I noticed that a lot of gifted students in their life have a problem saying know or saying they don't get it to like an authority figure. And I thought I could relate to that a lot. And I saw when she was talking to her second site counselor, when she asked, do you understand what I'm saying? She originally said no, but then she changed it to yeah. And I thought that was very relatable to my own experiences. Because I also have a hard time telling other people in my life that like I struggle with something, considering like I was considered smart when I was growing up. And I think that affected me now. And I was wondering, does the main character ever like dive more into that aspect of the book?
About being a formerly gifted kid, or that part specifically?
Like having gifted kid burnout.
Oh, yeah. I have complicated thoughts about gifted kid burnout because I feel like everyone has a gift. You know, everyone can be gifted in some way, and I feel like sometimes if you don't meet the general societal criteria of what a gifted kid looks like, that, oh, you're just dumb, or you're regular, and whatever. So, you know, that said, I also experienced that. I was in like the good classes, but then it's like as soon as my supports kind of fell away, or as soon as like my main support, my mom, was not available to me, and then all this other stuff was going on. And by the way, like another horrible thing that happened when I was 17 is my dog got stolen. Like on top of all of this, so I was like, I think that was right before I was hospitalized. I was just like, can we stop? But yeah, why? But it's like what I find interesting and what I was trying to explore is that it's like as soon as I wasn't like performing exactly like how authorities in my life expected me, I was just kind of cast off, just kind of like exactly how Minerva was. So with Minerva, I think that she struggles. So her mother was at there. So I think it might be exactly the previous chapter where she talks about how her mother was really, before she got really, really sick and started being hospitalized, she was like pushing her to apply for scholarships and apply to private schools. And she was like, you're gifted, you're gifted, you're gifted, because she had been gifted as a child. And she kind of felt like she never really knew if she really is gifted, but rather that's something that her mother was like trying to input, because her mother had the same sort of, a similar identity where she had grown up in that same town, and she got pregnant at 19, and then she dropped out of college, and she was a smart woman, and a gifted person, I guess. And so she was like kind of pushing that on Minerva, but when her mother couldn't do that anymore because of her sickness, and like kind of be on top of that, then she questioned whether, well, am I gifted? Like, what do I even have to offer? So her mother not being there, so it does, like, I would say I'm not gonna tell you what happens in the end regarding school, but yeah, the book does continue to explore that. And she really, you know, a big aspect of the book is that she, through the relationships that she has with the people around her who do care, she kind of learns to come out of that shell that she has built around herself, and then she can eventually come back around to school. So I think that in the end, like, the gifted thing it's not as important as like finding community and speaking your truth. Like once that happens, then you can maybe come back to like, well, what is my actual purpose and what do I want to do in life? I like to think that this character, the book doesn't go into it, but I like to think that when she grows up, like as an adult, she is like a travel writer and rides a motorcycle around. She likes cars. She's really into cars. And so I like to think that she graduates to a motorcycle and that she likes to travel because that's what she enjoys. Like she really likes the idea of like being away, just like me. So yes and no. Would you like a book? Okay. All right. Next question. I saw this hand first.
So how did you create the character's personality?
Oh, that's a good question, because I do get a lot of questions about the character herself, but I don't really get a lot about how I constructed the personality. So I actually had the idea for the character. It came to me very quickly. So when I was in high school and I was like not going to class, at some point I had this idea that I wanted to work in like theater. And so I got various like internships in like the theater world in Manhattan. At one point I worked at like the theater that does The Lion King, and I worked there for like 2 weeks. But in one of these interns, and I was also like failing and like not going to class, but I was also doing internships. Like it's very, very strange time. But in one of my internships, I met a boy, and it didn't work out. But he told me about his sister. He had a little sister named Fire. I think was her name. His name was Rain, and her name was Fire. I guess their parents were hippies or something. I don't know. But he showed me a picture of her, and I just thought she just looked so cool. Like she had this like darker skin and this bleached hair, and she had like, I think she had a bandana on in one of the pictures, and this character just kind of came to me of just like kind of angry, kind of set. One thing that the character is known for is in her workplace is at the ice cream stand is like saying things out loud that nobody else wants to say. Like, so their boss is terrible, is like watching the girls and being a creep, and everybody else is kind of like, well, that's just how it is. And she's like, no, this is wrong. And so that's one of her traits, is that she's outspoken and she says things even if everybody else thinks it's uncomfortable. And yeah, so I didn't really like consciously construct the character's personality. It really just kind of came to me. And in writing the story, I would say it was like discovering the character rather than constructing the character. Like, and I think that that's important, because the better you know a character, the easier it is to write the story, honestly. And so, like, there's certain things at certain points, like I felt like, and I feel that way about every character in the book, every character that I write. And if I don't have that connection to any of the characters, it becomes very difficult to write the story, because I can't hear their voice. Like, I need to I identify the character, their voice just kind of comes to me. I don't know how to explain it beyond that. And then it's more of a process of discovering more things about them. Like, even after this book was published, somebody asked me, what's Minerva's favorite flavor of ice cream? And number one, I was like, damn, I wish I put that in there, because I didn't. And, sorry to curse. I don't know. And number two, I was like, oh, cookies and cream. Even though I'd like not thought about it, but I was like, I knew the character enough to be like, oh, she likes cookies and cream, that's her favorite. Like, and I could say that with certainty, and that's it. So again, it's like a process of discovery. I don't know if that is clear, but in the interest of time, any other? Would you like a book? Okay. Yes.
So what like inspired you to write the book in the first place?
Well, when I was in my late teens, I would say late teens, early 20s, I kind of realized that there weren't a lot of books about people who had been through what I'd been through with a sick parent specifically. And I remember sitting down and writing about this just as a way to get it out. Like, I had no plans. And like you heard that, right? I technically started writing this when I was like an older teenager or like in my early 20s. But the actual story that ended up coming out, not until like my 30s. But like just like the world and the character and the idea, but like that kernel, that I just distinctly remember being like, you know, there's books about people who have dead parents, and there's a lot of books about kids in the suburbs with problems that I don't really understand. And definitely more so back then. I think now there's a lot more diversity, a lot more racial diversity. I'm not sure about, I feel like there could be a little bit more economic diversity in young adult fiction that comes out, but that's, you know, everything's a work in progress. But yeah, it was that I was like, I don't see anything that really speaks to the fact that I have a sick parent and I feel so alienated and I can't talk about it, and I wanted to write about it, and then I had an idea for the character, and it just kind of eventually coalesced into a story. But then there's also like little things that inspire me, like I'm really like the setting of the town. Like I love the beach. I love the idea of a beach town that isn't fancy, or that's like maybe got some crime going on, or has segregation in terms of like racial and economic segregation. When I was a teenager, I spent a lot of time in this neighborhood called Rockaway Beach in Queens, and it was extremely segregated. It was beautiful, but it was like split. It was a peninsula split down the middle. It's like one side that was like the non-beach side, that's where the housing projects were, and then the other side is where like the middle income and like houses were. And I just found it so interesting that a place that was so beautiful could have that much poverty and be so starkly segregated, like literally down the middle. So the place was a big inspiration as well. Would you like a book? Okay. Next, anyone else? Yes.
I like the fact that you said like you was always like a smart kid growing up, and you always like writing, but then you got into a creative writing class and then like as much effort in high school because you felt like the teacher you already didn't have the truth, or like it just wasn't a good time, or that it was hard for you to focus at the time in that particular course.
Oh, so more of a comment?
Like what was your hardships within that class that you took, and what could you give to someone that has a similar situation?
So I'm not going to say that. Okay, there were two creative writing teachers in my high school. My high school is called Midwood High School. And there was one that everybody loved, who I did not get. And then there was one who was like, I don't know, close to retirement or something. And I don't know. And I'm not going to say like it was like her fault, because at that time, I was a very angry child. And I didn't really give things a chance, or like and I'm not saying like, oh, if I could go back, like I was just surviving, you know? But I think that, so let me just answer the question, like what advice? I would say, just do you. Keep writing and reading, because at the end of the day, it's not really about, like the class it shouldn't be the thing that gives you validation. Like the fact that I didn't really connect with my teacher, like in high school, I only had like a couple English teachers or writing teachers who I really connected with. But it's like, it's not really, at that time, like I felt so confident in my ability to be a writer, that it was more annoying that I wasn't connecting with this teacher than it was like a bad thing that was happening. It was just like, yeah, isn't it weird that I'm like writing novels and my teacher doesn't really like, that I'm not connecting with this class and this teacher? It was more of that. And so I think at the end of the day, like, you work on your own stuff and you explore your own stuff and you connect, and that confidence of having put in that time and that work is really what matters. Because it doesn't matter that what right now, having published a book, it doesn't matter that I did well or not in my creative writing class. Like, it matters that I stuck to the craft and that I kept developing it. So, and I can tell you that before I actually published this book, I knew I was a good writer, but part of me was like, there's certain things that I feel like I'm not going to be able to do until, like this visit, until I put that out. And once the book came out, it clicked that this childhood dream that I had been realized. And I feel like that gave me so much confidence and strength, and like knowing myself and being like, I did this, nobody can take it away from me. My creative writing teacher can't take it away from me. The teachers in college, because I didn't get along with every creative writing teacher in college either. I honestly, I was a very good writer. I did really well. I was one of the best. I got awards and stuff, but I did not get along with every teacher. And it doesn't matter anymore. Like, it doesn't matter because I knew myself that I was working on my stuff and that my stuff was good. So I don't know how you want to structure that advice, but that's how I feel about it.
Thank you so much. That definitely does help.
And I want to add too that I still feel very strongly that like going to college saved me. Like, it really did. Like, I don't feel bad that I wanted to get out of that apartment. Like, I should not. Like, I don't. And as much as I love my family, I don't feel bad about that. But I think that it was a gateway to other things in my life that had nothing to do with writing, like meeting a network of people who are doing really cool stuff, like learning about workshopping. Like, being in college helped me understand like I can do. That's one of the reasons that I do say, like, if you want to be a writer, it is a good idea to do work, whether you're officially majoring in that or not. Like, going to workshops will teach you how to look at writing objectively and how to structure conversations about writing in a way that is productive and helpful to everybody. So, yeah, I think that school is helpful and can provide a lot of structure and really important information, especially depending on what you're trying to do, but you got to match that with what you're trying to do and your craft.
Yeah. And I also feel like it's also a mental health thing. Like, us kids, we go through a lot with mental health and we get burnt out really easily. So when it comes down to academics, I'm a very much strong believer in you can't do anything unless you're good up here. You have to be mentally okay and prepared for the assignments and work that is being presented in front of you. No, it don't matter to me how important it is. I have to make sure I'm okay before I do anything. So
It's true.
Thank you for giving me that information.
Thank you. That's such a lovely sentiment and so real. So I do have these little notebooks. You don't have to take one. So we have 5 more minutes? What? About that? Okay, any other questions or comments or concerns? I got every question. Oh, hi.
How long does it take to publish a novel, and when do you start making money, and when do you become a bestseller?
Well, that hasn't happened to me. Has happened to some of my friends. Every published author's path is different. And for me, I have a whole other career that I'm very much invested in and has taken a lot of my time. So I said earlier that I'm a very slow writer, and that's kind of by choice. Like for me, reading is more important, like reading every day or reading on a regular basis is more important than writing on a regular basis. Because as my agent told me once, if you're not filling the well, you can't get anything out. It's gonna be hard to get stuff out. So that's why reading is so important. But, so I take a very long time to, to cobble things together, to generate the story. Although this one took maybe like a year to write, which is actually, for me, it's not that long. Although the story had been simmering for a very long time and like different versions of it. And so, I mean, for me, like I got an agent. And so when you publish traditionally, not every time, but a lot of the time you get a literary agent. And I wrote a book that didn't sell. That I think it took like maybe a year. So when you get an agent, they send your stuff out to editors, and then the editors come back with offers, or nobody wants it. And so that's what happened to the first book that I tried to sell, which I'm glad, because when I look back, I don't really like it that much. So I'm glad that this was the first book that I came out with. But so that didn't sell, and then my mother died, and then I had a kid, and like all these years went by, and at certain points, I simply, as I said, was not prioritizing writing. And so it took me like 8 years to finally come up with another book. 5 to 8 years, I would say. And that was out, we were sending it out to publishers about almost 2 years. It can take that long. And once we landed we got an offer from Soho Press, 2 years after that is when the book came out. And that's typical. Like it takes time to edit the book multiple times to really get it to sing, to get it sharp, and things like marketing and planning and planning the release, and that's why it takes 2 years. And those 2 years do tend to fly by after like the second half of it. The first half, it's like, did I really sell a book? Like nothing's happening. But on the back end, they're like planning out their schedule and reading the book again and making their notes, like the editor is like sending them back the notes. For other writers I know, they send a book out their agent sends a book out to editors, and they get an offer within a few weeks, and then they're off to the races. So it really depends. As for a bestseller, nobody can answer that. There's no recipe. Sometimes it's luck, sometimes it's you just hit the zeitgeist at the right angle at the right time. So I don't know how long it takes to become a bestseller. I really don't. Like it's different for every single person. And there's also different kinds of bestsellers. And it's also, the New York Times bestseller list is curated. It's not real. It's not like, they're not like, these are the top books. Definitively, like they kind of choose it. And so there's a lot of like behind the scenes stuff that you don't really find out until you're like in it. But yeah, I hope I answered your question in a somewhat cohesive way. But I think we're done now, right? I'm sorry for really pushing up against the time, but would you like a little tiny notebook?
Okay, again, I want to thank Ms. Padilla for coming in. And the PTSO brought some refreshments over here, if you wanted to grab some on your way out. Try not to get done before you get to the next class, so I don't have a bunch of teachers mad at me, please. But thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you here, and this is great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. You all were so lovely. Thank you.